Have you watched the previous episode's video? Welcome to the story of this episode, Chapter 29, The Difficult Attempt to Repair the Spiritual Power Core. Sumu stepped into this circular space full of mystery and unknowns. His eyes were immediately drawn to the spiritual power core in the center, which was emitting a faint light and covered with cracks on its surface. He was well aware that repairing the spiritual power core was not only the key to restoring the normal operation of this plane, but also the only way for him to leave this mysterious world and return home. Sumu slowly approached the spiritual power core with caution in every step. He could clearly feel the chaotic and weak spiritual power fluctuations of the spiritual power core, as if a dying life was struggling in pain. Taking a deep breath, Sumu decided to try using reverse time spiritual power to repair this damaged core. He stretched out his hands and circulated the reverse time spiritual power. The reverse time spiritual power flowed out from his palms like a clear and mysterious stream of water, carefully being injected towards the spiritual power core. At first, everything seemed to be going rather smoothly. The reverse time spiritual power was like a pair of gentle hands, gently caressing the cracks on the spiritual power core. Under the effect of the reverse time spiritual power, the cracks began to show signs of healing. A glimmer of hope welled up in Sumu's heart, and he increased the injection speed of the reverse time spiritual power, hoping to complete the repair as soon as possible. However, as the reverse time spiritual power continued to be injected, the spiritual power core suddenly had a strong rejection reaction. A powerful counterforce burst out from the spiritual power core, like a surging undercurrent, pushing Sumu away violently. Caught off guard, Sumu was like a kite with a broken string, falling heavily to the ground, and a wisp of blood oozed from the corner of his mouth. Sumu was not defeated by this unexpected setback. He gritted his teeth, endured the pain in his body, and stood up again. He knew that repairing the spiritual power core was by no means an easy task and required sufficient patience and perseverance. This time, he changed the way of injecting the reverse time spiritual power. Instead of inputting it all at once without any order, he guided the reverse time spiritual power into the spiritual power core gently and rhythmically, like the spring breeze turning into rain. Sumu calmed down, concentrated all his mental energy, and closely connected his consciousness with the reverse time spiritual power, trying to find the best frequency to communicate with the spiritual power core. His hands trembled slightly, and his forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat, but his eyes were extremely firm. Under his control, the reverse time spiritual power flowed slowly with a delicate rhythm, gradually approaching the spiritual power core. When the reverse time spiritual power touched the spiritual power core again, the repulsive force of the spiritual power core was still strong, but it had weakened compared to before. Seizing this opportunity, Sumu carefully pushed the reverse time spiritual power deeper into the spiritual power core, striving to repair those cracks. With his unremitting efforts, the reverse time spiritual power successfully repaired several smaller cracks, and the light of the spiritual power core became a bit brighter. However, just when Sumu felt delighted, the spiritual power core suddenly released an even more powerful force. It not only rebounded all the reverse time spiritual power, but also triggered a spiritual power storm in the surroundings. The spiritual power storm raged in the circular space like an angry beast. The powerful spiritual power impact made it almost impossible for Sumu to stand steadily. He quickly activated his spiritual power shield, trying to resist this violent force, but the shield flickered and trembled under the impact of the spiritual power storm, on the verge of breaking at any moment. Sumu knew that such blind attempts were unlikely to succeed. He had to find a more reliable method. He began to search for clues around the space, hoping to find some items or hints related to the repair of the spiritual power core. In a corner of the space, Sumu discovered an ancient stone tablet engraved with dense characters. Some of these characters had become blurred due to years of erosion, but with his keen observation and knowledge of spiritual power, Sumu was still able to make out most of the content. The characters recorded the history of this plane and the origin of the spiritual power core. It turned out that this plane was once a testing ground created by a powerful spiritual power master to explore the mysteries of spiritual power. The spiritual power core was the energy hub of the entire plane, controlling the balance of time and space. However, a sudden accident broke this balance, resulting in the damage of the spiritual power core, the standstill of time, and the chaos of the plane. At the same time, the stone tablet also mentioned a special method of spiritual power fusion that might be used to repair the spiritual power core. This method required deeply integrating one's own spiritual power with the spiritual power in the surrounding environment to form a new, more stable and powerful spiritual power. Sumu realized that this might be the answer he had been looking for. According to the method recorded on the stone tablet, Sumu began to try to integrate his own spiritual power with the spiritual power in the surrounding environment. He closed his eyes, concentrated, and felt the flow of the surrounding spiritual power. He found that although the spiritual power in this circular space was chaotic, it contained a unique rhythm. Sumu tried his best to adjust the frequency of his own spiritual power to match the rhythm of the surrounding spiritual power. After arduous efforts, Sumu finally successfully integrated his own spiritual power with the spiritual power in the surrounding environment. He could feel that the fused spiritual power had become more powerful and was filled with a mysterious force. Sumu came to the spiritual power core again and injected this fused spiritual power into it. This time, the spiritual power core seemed less repulsive. The fused spiritual power smoothly integrated into the spiritual power core and began to gradually repair those cracks. The light of the spiritual power core became brighter and brighter, and the cracks were quickly healing. However, the repair process was not without difficulties. As the cracks gradually healed, the spiritual power core began to absorb a large amount of spiritual power. Sumu could feel his spiritual power rapidly draining. If this continued, he might be unable to complete the repair due to the exhaustion of spiritual power. Sumu gritted his teeth and decided to take a risk. He mobilized all the spiritual power in his body and injected it into the spiritual power core regardless of the consequences. The spiritual power core shone brightly, and the cracks quickly healed under the effect of the powerful spiritual power. But Sumu also passed out due to the exhaustion of spiritual power, his vision going black. The story continues. More exciting content is coming up. Subscribe as soon as possible.